and good afternoon. Welcome to another live stream. And today I want to share with you my initial impressions of a graphic novel that I backed on Kickstarter. This was a campaign I came across earlier this year and earlier this week. The fruits of my I don't know, is it an investment on Kickstarter? I suppose it is. Fruits of my investment arrived, and I'm kind of excited about it. Um, you've also caught me slightly flustered as well because I've been today. I'm using my phone as the webcam above the stream here, um, so that hopefully it will have a much more sensitive focus. So I'll be able to sort of hold things up to the camera. Voila! And yeah, so that hopefully will be, if you're going to be looking at artwork, the focus of the camera is important. And last time, the other webcam wasn't quite up to the task of, really granular focus on pieces of interest. I'm also going to be opening an beer. It is Friday afternoon. I'm in the mood for a beer, so I've got Hobgoblin, quite a nice ruby beer. In fact, the whole Witchwood Brewery range is magnificent. At Halloween, actually at Halloween and Christmas, they do some wonderful gothic-y sort of beers. One of them is Dunkel Fest. No, Dunkel. Is it Dunkel Festa? Basically a play on Uncle Fester from the Addams Family. Good afternoon. Hello, Willem and Beck. And then you have Humbug, I think, at Christmas. They released that as well. So, but today it's Hobgoblin Ruby beer, which I can't show you on its side now because I've opened the bottle. So, yeah. So hopefully, use my phone as my webcam will give us that focus. And where to start? I mean, I've already posted a photo of the book itself that arrived a couple of days ago. And also it came with, because an awful lot of the stretch goals were met on the campaign, it came with lots of bits of artwork, etc., which I sort of agreed to stretch my initial support with, because frankly this artwork looked quite cool as well. And for me, at least so far, the this Kickstarter has one big rival, certainly in my life, and in that sense, in my eyes as well. And that is, of course, the book whose review is currently sitting as the sort of the channel trailer for this YouTube channel, and that is At the Mountains of Madness graphic novel by Colbard. Is it INJ Colbard? And this book I praised immensely for its atmosphere and for its the artwork, which at times is sort of reminiscent of a heavier version of the line work that you see, for example, in Tintin, the Hergé sort of style, which is perfect for this period storytelling. And this book remains one of my favourite graphic novels, actually. Never mind Lovecraftian stories and versions of the telling. So this thing had to sort of stand up to that, and I don't know if that's fair or unfair. But I suppose ultimately I can only bring my own experiences to the table here. I can't imagine that I haven't seen that other version of this story. But nonetheless, I was interested. I was curious, and so I backed it. And well, let's take a look at some of the artwork. Now the story. Oh, incidentally, sorry. Those of you who don't know, the story of At the Mountains of Madness, or in this case, The Mountains of Madness, revolves around an Antarctic expedition. And there's a scientist who's very insistent that there's a planned incursion into that region of the Mountains of Madness shouldn't go ahead because of the things that his earlier scientific expedition uncovered. And the story is essentially told as a warning to the scientists who are heading to Antarctica. And some of this artwork really hints at it, and it's beautiful. It's really nicely rendered. This is actually printed on quite a high quality stock card, and has a sort of a matte finish to it. And we see sort of Antarctic skies and sort of mountain ice shards being overtaken by a presumably some sort of Shoggoth-like monster, sort of oozing out of a cave, and there's someone there in the foreground who's presumably imminently about to go insane from the experience. And this is the sort of thing that I'll probably have framed actually and hang somewhere. Although actually in recent days I've acquired um, some a couple of small bits of art and also rediscovered some of my own stuff that I've been hanging and framing, sort of framing and hanging. So I'm running out of space in my wee little office. This piece here really impressed me. It's quite grim, but it's an exploration of in the story. Some of the explorers, they have dogs with them, sled dogs, which are a team of the people, and some of their dogs are taken by some monsters and essentially experimented on by these elder beings, these squiggly well, actually, in the story, they're sort of barrel shaped, and actually, indeed, in the Colbard version, they're much more like your traditional uh, ancient ones or elder things. In this story, they're a little bit different. The artwork is, but again, it's quite evocative, quite grim. Uh, Again, very high quality cardstock print. I was very pleased with that when it arrived. This is someone presumably suffering uh, from cosmic insanity, having just witnessed something that they cannot comprehend, just getting insane. Again, it's quite cool. Very, actually, it makes me think of like a fruit drink, like like Lilt or something. You could put that on a bottle, and if people didn't look too closely, they might go, "Oh yes, that looks quite tasty." Lime, lots of lime and bananas and things. Um, and here we have this is presumably a potential cover piece of art. It looks like it anyway. Almost like a film poster. So you have the Mountains of Madness, the plane crashing. You have the Elder thing in the background there. The Shoggoth. Shoggoths are kind of like black slimy things covered in eyes. They're genetic mutations, monsters created by elder beings to serve them in the world before humans were ever alive around. And also, you may be able to see something else here that's apparent. This combination of the Antarctic wolves, monsters, shapeshifters. It's all very John Carpenter, The Thing, or actually, I suppose, was it? Is it Who Goes There? There was a The Night Watchman or something. There was a film, an earlier film, which I think was called Who Goes There, which was based on a book, a story that inspired The Thing. But it itself was inspired, I think, more or less by At the Mountains of Madness. So again, quite cool artwork, and again, I like the lines and the colouring. It's quite funky, actually. One of the scientists looking a lot like Harry Potter there. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Yeah. And this using my phone as the webcam is so much better, isn't it, for focus and also the color? You can see it so much more clearly there. So I think if I ever do another detailed live stream, we have to be able to see things up close. I'll definitely be using this again, this setup. So yeah, lots to enjoy, lots to like. This is a beer mat, quite appropriately to go with my beer, I suppose, from Blue Fox Comics. And this is the two scientists coming upon the city of the Elder Things with its non-Euclidean architecture. And non-Euclidean really just means lacking in straight lines. And as overly sarcastic productions, I believe they're called, pointed out in their sort of overview of Lovecraft's stories, technically everything is not quite straight because we live on a curved ball. All of our lines are actually subtly curved. So everything's not quite Euclidean, but it was a good way uh, of making things sound as though they're wrong, as though yeah. There's this idea that for example, the Call of Cthulhu, there are they come to an island which is the utmost part of a city under the water, and and there are spaces that look like they're concaves, but actually they're convex. There are places where you can fall and not look as though you're falling, so on and so forth. So it's kind of like a cross between, I guess, an Escher painting and yeah, that scene in Labyrinth when you don't know which way is up, this kind of thing. And I guess, Lovecraft attempted to explain that by calling it non-Euclidean geometry. We have some bookmarks here. The artwork, it really is something to be admired, isn't it? It's quite pretty. This is, I think, an underwater cavern in the story with possibly a Shoggoth reaching out of it. The Mountains of Madness. Adam Fieder, um, I think, wrote this version and also did the artwork for it. Blue Fox Comics. And then here we have the cityscape itself with all its non-Euclidean geometry. Blasphemous architecture reaching to the sky. This is the cover as it finally is on the graphic novel. Curly whirly, very almost Tim Burton-esque kind of curls going on there at the bottom, and then mirroring a sort of an iceberg almost with the ships silhouetted in front of it, the Mountains of Madness. Yeah, it's canny, isn't it? And so I'm pleased. I think this is a sticker, actually, of that non-Euclidean architecture on slightly more glossy paper stock. And there we go. Shoggoth Rising Out of the Water, Words and Art by Adam Fieder. And The Mountains of Madness, with presumably a Shoggoth beak coming at you. So I like it. And really, I mean, I haven't had a chance to read this yet. It's been a busy week. But I wanted today just to take a look at some of the artwork because it's intriguing me. And as I say, especially in contrast to that other version of the story, it's quite a nice hardback edition, and the print, the smell of the book is slightly calming down now, but it was initially an incredibly fresh smelling book. It was very much hot off the press and wrapped in plastic wrap, extremely quickly. And in the back, because I was backed it at a certain to a certain level, my name is printed in a list of thank yous. If we can, yeah, it's funny how you can always find a particular page when you're not wanting to, can't you? Let's see if we can get it on camera. Where am I? Somewhere in the middle-ish. Oh, getting closer. There we go. Mark Barkman-Essel's just in the middle there. Wonderful. So that's me, one of the backers of this piece, and a big thank you page at the back at the end of the book. Don't knock over your beer. Actually, I'll move my beer, in fact, just to hear. So where to begin? I suppose at the beginning. So it opens up with a prologue, which is quite nice. Actually, following a title page, The Mountains of Madness. Nice prologue. And this is where it's William Dyer in the original story, I think, approaches or is writing. He's writing saying, I will not be believed, but I must warn you for the horrible things that we discovered at that Mountain of Madness. But here he is handing over a diary to the expedition leader. And really, that's my understanding is that is really what the story is about. It's about the expedition gets underway and off they go. And this was actually one of the images that was used in the Kickstarter campaign. And I'm a stickler for a sucker. Sorry, not a stickler. I'm always a sucker for documents and things to rifle through in stories. And of course, it's not as though I can actually reach out and pick this stuff up, but it feels like the kind of thing you might find in a D&D campaign or something. And ultimately, let's face it, things like D&D were inspired by the adventures written by people like Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. So it's all circular, isn't it? I think overall, it's got a much more realistic. They've gone for something a bit more um, sort of fitted with realism, and so memories are portrayed in black and white, or for things that the stories, for example, in this instance, are portrayed in black and white. The characters' faces have much more line on them, portraying age or emotion compared to the Colvard story. And if I'm honest, initially I was a little bit disappointed by that. I was a little bit yeah, well, I guess it all comes down to what you're used to, but also in my case, what I'm a fan of. So, for example, I'm a huge Tintin fan, so I'm just trying to just reach over here and open the blinds to my window a little bit. See, my camera's struggling there. There we go. To pick a white balance. Yeah, so the artwork. Initially, I was a bit disappointed because I was thinking, oh well, but I like the other version of the story, and I really like Tintin. But this is not that, and I've sort of come to accept that relatively quickly. And actually, what this has is it has a sort of a documentary feel to it, much more than the Colbard version does. The Colbard version has an adventure feel. It has that Tintin, as I say, quality to it. This version, also actually told in a slightly different way. The story, I think, is inspired by um, at the Mountains of Madness. This story unfolds in a way which is much more cinematic, I suppose, than we get in Colbard's version as well. So, so there are pros and cons to both. And actually, incidentally, the scale, for example, of the ships, the scale is always something that I think is important in these stories. This idea of humans going into the great unknown and facing unknown horrors. Because I mean, for example, on the cover of At the Mountains of Madness, they emphasize scale there with two figures approaching spiky mountains with a snowstorm obliterating their view somewhat. Um, uh, whereas this stuff, um, it's much more subtle. It's a bit more. I suppose it's much less graphical in that sense. Like much less like a graphic design output, and much more like a painterly sort of approach, which is to be admired. So yes, I mean, so in short, Mackenzie, yes, the artwork has grown on me, definitely. Um, and this weekend, I actually plan on properly reading this story. I've skimmed it a couple of times, but as I say, I've had a very busy week, lots of late nights, and I haven't had a chance to properly read it. Um, but no, I'm enjoying the prospect of it. I love this color scheme here, this sort of salmon through to grey through to blue kind of thing that they've got going on for the snow and the sunset. Um, it's again, it contrasts well with Colbard's work. One area where I would criticize this a little bit is some of the slightly indistinct elements of artwork, and maybe what they're trying to do is get through to you that Lovecraft would often use phrases like undescribable to talk about monsters in particular, and in this instance we have, for example, that they're discovering what is it? There's more to this. There's more than that. It looks like there's some marks. They look intentionally made, some kind of ornament, I wonder. If it continues, they ask. And it's these sort of markings on a cave wall. And as they pass into the cave, this slightly leaves me wanting. This sort of, it almost looks like rolls of blubber on the side of a fish, doesn't it? And maybe that's the intention, is to make it feel as though, in the same way that in Aliens, when the Marines are passing into the xenomorphs lair underneath the cooling stations, um, is to make it feel a little bit as though, is this actually architectural, or has this been secreted? I mean, in canon in Aliens, it's secreted resin. When you have, what is that, Hudson? He goes, I don't know, man. I just work here, kind of thing. Um, so I mean, maybe that's part of the goal, and I think actually this whole approach is to create something which is much more like a dreamscape, as opposed to a confrontational, angular graphic design, yeah, graphic form of design. So you have this is their interpretation of the history of the city and the elder things and this kind of thing that they can glean from the engravings that they find on the wall. And again, I think the colours work really well for that. As they pass out of this cave, this is when they are they come out into the light, and they are confronted by that squiggly wiggly non-Euclidean city of the elder things in Antarctica. Now, if we compare this, I mean, this is actually I think I might prefer this as a piece of art, as a vista that they're gazing upon, because in Kolbard's At the Mountains of Madness, what we see is actually it's in reverse. Instead of coming through a cave and then discovering the city, in this version, they fly initially over the mountaintops, and then you see the city. And the city in this version is much more, I suppose, recognizable, isn't it? It's much more like a city, almost Art Deco in its design, which for me works again for the art style for this particular book. And then they go in and they come across all these weird uh, writings on the walls, and that's how they start to tell the story of what happened in the city. Which so here we have star signs and a continent laid out, this kind of thing, which we can see the version in this story is is just here. Um, so again, it's all just ways of telling, different ways of approaching the story, and I think I do appreciate it. I like the reflection on his glasses there. As he, the Plateau Lenk. What? It's the name of the forbidden plateau described in the Necronomicon, on which stands an ancient foreign city. And then they have to decide which way they're going, and it's all kind of like, it's almost like you're walking through a body or something, isn't it? It's not particularly recognizable as architecture, which again is entirely thematic to the story. Eventually, our heroes, as they're exploring the city, come upon um, some of the missing people from their party, but also the they come upon a cave in which, well, there were giant penguins in the original story, and I can't see any evidence of them in this story. But there is the Shoggoth reaching up out of the water to try and get to them, and then the true horror of it. Run! Kind of thing. What is it? A Shoggoth. He can't take long without water. The end of the tunnel, quick, sort of thing. It's good. It's good, and I think what I'm looking forward to, as ever with graphic novels, is really reading the story and getting into the artwork. Essentially living in the story, for the duration of my reading of it. And then some of them escape. We have the Arkham Advertiser, the return of the second Antarctic expedition. The outstanding scientist and polar explorer leaves the university in Miskatonic. So the guy ends up leaving his post, and then one of the guys ends up in an insane asylum, as so often happens in uh, in Lovecraft stories. And this one actually has it had a prologue, and it has a postscriptum where a Russian station discovers under the ice, sorry, a vast cavern filled with water. So it's a bit like Stranger Things or something, or indeed like The Thing. This could be leading into, something like The Thing type scenario, with scientists in Antarctica discovering unspeakable evil. And so this is an appendix of artwork included with the book. Again, this contrast between the dark sky and the white mountains is quite interesting, particularly when you look at Colbard's approach to have white sky, dark sky, white mountains, and then again for scale, two people at the bottom there, presumably surveying the mountains from a nearby peak sort of thing. The two scientists coming across the Shoggoth as it chases them, and then we have the cave and a little appendix. Oh no, this is a smaller story. Okay, interesting. Interesting. January 1933. Cool. So actually, again, I'm seeing most of this for the first time myself on this stream. So that's quite nice actually. And also, I like it when artists, especially in comic books, they play with, where the image ends, what's the background, and what's, negative and positive space, all this kind of thing. Uh, until today, I don't know what really happened and what was delirium. I told my companions about the cave, which of course we didn't find, but I didn't mention the pedestal or visions, and was my own that was my own personal mystery. The end. Intriguing. The Thing is such a great film. Have you ever checked out The Modern Thing? That's a sequel to the 80s film. Well, actually, The Modern Thing is it's a prequel, isn't it? It's set before John Carpenter's The Thing. But yes, I have seen it, and it's okay. It kind of sets up sort of what's happening in The Thing. But also, actually, I think that film they went to extraordinary lengths to scale everything and to make sure everything worked in relation to what was going to happen next. So actually, they used um, uh, Kurt Russell. Nearly forgot his name then. Kurt Russell as the scale. They would say, okay, well, in the Thing, when they visit the Norwegian base, this door is X many inches above Kurt Russell, so they made the set of the Norwegian base to those specifications. They were very exacting in that sense. I think it shows just how much, I guess, filmmakers and also cinephiles have enjoy the John Carpenter's The Thing. I think it's okay. I think one thing that comes out of the DVD extras on that movie is the fact that the studio didn't quite trust the the special effects artists to be able to deliver in the same way that on the original movie. They had was it I think at one point even the legendary John Landis consulted on it. Is it John Landis? Was that his name? The guy behind the Terminator effects, so on and so forth. Legendary. Um, and that's why the effects in the original are so amazing, and in the sequel they were going with practical effects, but the studio went, no, it's cheaper and more effective just to do CGI, so we'll just do CGI. And so in some ways I think it suffers, sort of, because part of the beauty of The Thing is the way that it moves in this slightly sort of you know limited way. It doesn't feel as fluid as it looks in the Thing prequel. Um, but no, I think it's okay. I think it's okay. I think the two work well together. I don't think I'd ever watch the prequel in isolation. I'd have to watch the prequel and then the sequel every time. I think, or the original every time. Um, so that's more or less it. At the Mountains of, the Mountains of Madness and At the Mountains of Madness are two very similar stories told using slightly different approaches. And um, I think I'm always going to appreciate the graphic style of this. This is very easy to get into, this one, and in that sense, it feels period correct. If you see what I mean. Because of that LJ connection. Whereas this one feels as though initially feels as though it's going to be much more psychological. Um, the fact it is, for example, the faces, it's the eyes, it's the emotion, it's um, the slightly less, well, more detailed and less cartoony look to the Thing that I think will make it feel a bit more on the edge of your seat, scary. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. In 1932, 2 years after the initial Antarctic expedition, another sets off to try and discover exactly what happened on that fateful trip. Before it leaves, a stranger gives a notebook to the expedition director, Howard Pym, and implores him to read it before they reach their destination. Preoccupied with the voyage ahead, Howard forgets about it and naively sails into dangerous waters ahead. Oh, that's an unfortunate repeat of the word ahead in the same sentence, isn't it? Um, Adam Fider embraces a Lovecraft classic and then gifts us with a beautiful homage to an icy expedition story that's equal parts atmospheric, intriguing, and horrifying. Comics Anonymous. So Yeah, Blue Fox Comics. I'm glad that I backed this. And incidentally, as well, I recently also backed because at the moment it feels as though it's important. I mean, it's not like anyone has any money at the moment, but it feels as though it's important to support artists and others uh, when income isn't necessarily immediately forthcoming. So I also recently backed a computer game called The Shore, which is a Lovecraftian horror game. It's sort of exploring a seaside, shoreline, which has been overtaken by eldritch, archaic elder beings, so on and so forth, and monsters. So I'm looking forward to that. And actually, the tier that I've backed it to, it's only the third tier that I've gone to, includes a free version of the game. So when that's released later this year, I'll definitely be playing it here on this YouTube channel. Um, yeah, there we go. I mean, I wasn't really sure how long this would take to go through, but I think it's been fun. And in particular, I just love I love it when people take very familiar happenings and pop culture references and so on and so forth, and reimagine them in their own artistic style, in their own way. In that sense, At the Mountains of Madness has been drawn and redrawn many times, and I'm sure that Adam Fider was very aware of that. Um, I really like this, and actually during incidentally, the Kickstarter campaign with Blue Fox was actually quite really quite good. There's lots of communication throughout the campaign, lots of emails, lots of little tidbits and digital pieces of artwork and extra small comics here and there, and before the book was released and came my way, the digital copy was emailed to me, but I didn't look at that, which which was difficult. What was really funny though was that for weeks I'd be getting every now and then just an email going, here's an email from Kickstarter or from the Kickstarter campaign, and it would be from is it Simon Burks, I think, the chap over there who be saying something like, "Well, the book is almost ready to be printed," and you're like, "Ah, it's so close, so close!" And then eventually, I think the last email I spotted, I knowingly got from them, said the books have been delivered. And soon they'll be ready for posting. And again, that was just like it was killing me, And then, oddly enough, I don't think we got an email saying they've been posted. But here we are. The Mountains of Madness was posted, and it arrived very promptly, seemingly. Um, I'm excited about this, and also I'm also pleased to be able to report on a good Kickstarter experience as well. I think quite often Kickstarter is plagued by bad experiences, by people who never quite deliver or people who under deliver. And in this instance, it's been pitched just right. Um, there was also actually as one of the tiers, you get a Lego minifig of Cthulhu, which I was vaguely tempted by, but at the same time, I didn't need it. I've already got quite a nice Cthulhu statue over there on my shelf. So yeah, so there we go. The Mountains of Madness. I think will compare favourably with At the Mountains of Madness. Although I wonder if one will remain my favourite over the other as the years pass by. I guess we'll see. Uh, voila. Well, unless you guys have any particular questions, I might bring things to a close. It's been a relatively brief live stream, but thank you for joining me. My plan next week is to do Half-Life 2, continue with Half-Life 2, possibly even, I don't know, that might be the end of the game next week, possibly, who knows? But also, I finally have time to put together the Batman versus Predator uh, video, which is going to be interesting because this isn't going to be a why I love video. It's going to be essentially a reading Batman versus Predator and talking a little bit about what I like about it, but also why I couldn't quite bring myself to say I love this story because it has some very familiar uh, and possibly overused Batman tropes in it. But again, that should be an interesting video next week as well. Um, Thank you, guys, and have a great weekend. Also, if there are any newer, exciting games that I need to know about, that either have a sort of a fun Lovecraftian bent to them, or a, slightly spooky sort of atmosphere, please do let me know. I'm always on the lookout for those things. There's actually loads of free versions on, free small tech demo of slightly scary games on Steam at the moment. Very much enjoying those. The artists who did these books did a really good job. I think they would do a good job doing artwork for a thriller about the disappearance of the HMS Terror and HMS Endurance in the Antarctic in 1813. Absolutely. Although they went missing north of Canada, so they went missing in the Arctic Circle, I think. But yes, they would definitely. And actually, the HMS Terror, which is it's a perfect name for a horror movie, isn't it? HMS Terror. Um, and the Endurance, they were trying. I think they were trying. The Navy was trying to find a route through to the Pacific via going around North America instead of having to go, south or use um, use some other means or go. Yeah, they were trying to find a shortcut. And archaeologically, I'm interested in that because there was one member of the crew who died early on called John Torrington, and John Torrington is a fairly infamous discovery in so much as he was buried in the permafrost. So they dug down into the permafrost, and he was interred with various artifacts. His clothes were still perfectly preserved when he was discovered, and the only part of him that had really started to go bad was the tip of his nose that wasn't quite in the permafrost anymore. So yeah, so just this bit here was in sort of the snow that melts away and refreezes every year. Um, but John Torrington, yeah, is a fairly, no, sorry, an extremely well preserved body from the history of archaeology. And for a long time, the theory was that it was the canning, the tin cans that they used to preserve, and frankly, expeditions like the one described in H.P. Lovecraft's story, would have used this sort of technology, where the tins were welded shut with lead. So the canning had been invented by well, it was commissioned as an invention by Napoleon Bonaparte for his troops when they were on campaign. And ironically, they were invented long before, decades before the tin opener. So one of the issues with the Napoleonic campaign was that they went east to Russia in the winter and couldn't open their food. They were trying to use bayonets, and they were spoiling whole tins of food by trying to just get at it. Um, but in the case of the Terror and the Endurance, um, I forgot. Oh, what was the captain's name? Yeah, he had quite a memorable name actually. Anyway, they had this sort of technology, and they think that maybe actually when they resorted to their tinned rations after their fresh food ran out, that's when they started to get worse and worse because lead makes you weak. Eventually, it has an effect on your psyche. It basically poisons you. And John Torrington may have been the first to succumb to the poisoning and or the cold in that instance. So yeah, in fact, on my other YouTube channel, on my professional channel, um, I've done a little video about John Torrington. So if you want, I can put a link to that video in the. I think I've done a video about him in the video in the description for this stream when I'm done. But yes, they did. They found the wrecks a few years ago, which for a long time that was a mystery. Where were the ships? What happened to them? Did any of the crew survive any longer? So on and so forth. So there's lots of questions to answer about that. And actually, you could go either way, couldn't you? In a movie, you could go full sort of Apollo. Um, uh, what was it? Was it Apollo? Basically, there was a film that was called. It was named Apollo. I don't know, 15 or something. It was like the mission that was the last time people went to the moon, supposedly. And this found footage that NASA was trying to suppress of a monster on the moon. So you could do that kind of thing with this sort of film, couldn't you? Or you could, be very straight down the line. Because actually, in this instance, real people died. Well, real people always die in that sense. But real people died on a speculative mission to try and find a shortcut, and uh, and maybe it might be deemed disrespectful to turn it into a sci-fi. But if I was a sci-fi writer, script writer, I would, maybe have something called the Terror and, um, the Invictus or something. Have these two ships go missing and go a bit Lovecraftian in a film. That would be kind of canny, wouldn't it? I'd have a lot of fun with that, certainly. In fact, I might even back that on Kickstarter. Um, but yes, if John Torrington, well worth looking into, definitely. And it's all in this spirit of things. Lovecraft was deeply, even though he was a very, in many ways, a very troubled and uh, what's the word? A very phobic fella. He was scared of other people, especially people who weren't from Rhode Island. Sorry, from Providence, not Rhode Island, from Providence. He was very scared of illness. He was scared of his own body. In fact, he often thought he was a deeply deformed person, and in that sense also he was scared of extremities like cold, for example. And so for him, actually writing this story, it seems as though almost the landscape itself is partly a character. It's out to get you, and that's part of the horror. And in so many ways, the fact that, as I say, The Thing remains one of the very best of that genre is largely because of the stories, or this story rather. Um, I think obviously Lovecraft has his problems, and there are issues that age him not very well. But as someone who laid out, so for example, I've started listening recently to the complete fiction of Lovecraft from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. And the first story in that collection is called The Alchemist. It's a story I'd never heard of before. But it's wonderful because it has so many of these trappings. He wrote it when he was 17 years old, and it has like Gothic architecture. So he's clearly picking up the baton from older scary stories, even Edgar Allan Poe, which I think he was related to Edgar Allan Poe, somewhat distantly. But picking up sort of Gothic architecture and Gothic horror stories and playing with it a bit, and he plays with it in a way which reflects his other obsessions, things like genetics and ancestry and connections to the old world and so on and so forth. But there's imagery towards the end of that story, and given that he's a teenager when he's writing it, there's imagery there which is still used today in cinema to reflect things like corruption. So if someone's I don't know, stabbed by a cursed blade, then you sort of see black, veins come up their face and their eyes turn black, this black sheen over their eyes, and that tells you this person is infected, this person is corrupted. That imagery is right there at the end of that story in The Alchemist, and I was very impressed. So it's there are lots of other writers to draw, to admire as well, but I think when it comes to this heady mixture, of late 19th century, early 20th century fear of the unknown, because there was a bit more to not that wasn't known about at that point, combined with an optimistic but also tentative fear of progress. Um, then you get precisely what's in these stories. I mean, in another one of his stories, it's all about air conditioning. So yeah, this idea that there's someone living in a flat in New York who is keeping themselves unnaturally alive through air conditioning, through this mechanically cold air. It's drawing on Dracula. It's drawing on so many other classical tropes about unnatural long life, but folding it in with a weird mixture. Well, again, overly sarcastic productions jokingly said at one point in their video, HP stands for hates progress, hates progress Lovecraft. So yeah, it's something that I'm very much enjoying, and the thing is also, as I said in my review of At the Mountains of Madness, for years, all through my life, people had said to me, "You would love Lovecraft. Just give him a read." Um, because of the influences that he's had on pop culture and horror movies and uh, so many things across the board. Tim Burton, all sorts of stuff. Um, they're right. I did love Lovecraft without even knowing it, and but now that I've actually started reading and understanding the stories, I appreciate. It's a bit like learning a little bit uh, about the history of art or something, or learning about your own family history. You start to appreciate why things exist in a family tree, and it's because of these things that came before. So yeah, and this is just the latest step, and I'm happy to say that in the back of this particular book, my name is to be found because of the Kickstarter campaign. So there you go. Voila! I've rambled on there for a goodly long time. I've got slight hiccups. Excuse me. Sorry, that was quite a belch. When you said the Alchemist, I thought for a sec, like you said Full Metal Alchemist. That anime freaks me out. Yes. No, no, not quite the same thing, but yes, I have seen that. Yeah, that's an odd one, isn't it? Definitely. Um, but yeah, it's been fun. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully everyone's got a good weekend planned. We are continuing our journey in I think it said Assassin's Creed there. It's the same letters, isn't it? Animal Crossing. And today I got this morning I was given some steampunk goggles in that game. A lot of fun. Hopefully you got good plans for the weekend, and I shall see you guys next week. Poor Nina Tucker. Precisely, yes. Poor Nina. Poor Nina. Again, as I say, guys, thank you very much for watching. And well, until next time, take care. Bye bye.